And I think the recipe for this is pretty simple. And I'll expand a little bit on each of these boxes now, but essentially we want to make sure that we're aligning on the goal. For example, let's agree that it's a good idea to have the floor be visible in your room, or let's agree that it's a good idea for you to have homework done on time before getting to school, or let's agree that it's a good idea to not create a lot of noise for our neighbors, right? Something like that, but let's agree on that. And once we've agreed on the goal, let's see if we can agree on a solution or a possible solution, a way to achieve that goal. And once we've done all of those, things become really easy. Once we agree on the goal and agree on the way, it becomes really pretty easy. But it's very, very hard if we don't even agree on the goal. Then it's just kind of a long and painful journey as we try to drag them toward our goal. So getting buy-in is the very first thing, right? If we have something that we want our kid to do, it's very important to make sure that our kid also wants to do it. And so how do we do this? Just a little bit of the why, but here are some more specific points about why agreeing on the goal is so important, right? Because if it doesn't make sense to me, and if it doesn't feel good to me, oh, that's a typo, sorry. If it doesn't feel good to me, I'm not likely to try and pursue that, right? But if it does make sense to me, and if it does feel good to do it, I'm much more likely to pursue this thing, right? So take the example of not doing, let's say we live in an apartment and there's somebody living under us and we're trying to convince our kids not to jump up and down on the carpet or on the floor. Is there a way for us to do it that would make sense to our kids and that would feel good to them? I'm thinking young kids for this particular example. And if we can get there, then we're much more likely to have their cooperation. There are a couple of things that come into play when we're trying to align on goals. One, which we'll talk about in a minute, is this general question of, do we even agree on the goal? Do we agree that it's a good idea not to make noise for the neighbors? Do we agree it's a good idea to do homework on time and so on? But underneath that is the relationship that we have with our kids, right? How much do they trust us? When we say this is a good idea, is their initial thought, well, if he says that, it's probably a good idea? Or is their initial thought, I don't want to do anything that he wants to do? I think about the strength of relationship as the amount of goodwill that exists in it, right? It's almost like a bank account, like a relational bank account, and the balance is represented by the amount of goodwill. And the more goodwill we have in the relationship, the more good things will happen, right? The more trust we have in each other, the more honest we'll be with each other, the more effort we'll put into meeting requests that are made, the more we'll cooperate, which is today's topic. The way to increase the amount of goodwill in a relationship is to show care and to show respect, to demonstrate it really clearly. Right? Say, I care about you and what's important for you. I respect you and the choices that you make. And part of showing respect is not forcing people to do things that they don't want to do. Right? So the more we can incorporate this into our regular daily behavior, the stronger the relationship becomes, the easier it is for our child to accept our goals and to at least give them a serious consideration as maybe worthwhile. Withdrawals are made by the opposite, right? If we show our kid that we don't care about him, we say, well, that's not a consideration. It doesn't matter to me. I need to do what I need to do. Or if we show our child that we don't really respect boundaries that the child put or goals that the child has, all of these things draw goodwill out of the relationship. I'm not going to go in depth into this. It's essentially a separate session, but this is something to keep in mind, and a way to get a quick kind of a dipstick test of how strong the relationship balance is in your account is to ask, what do interactions typically look like? If we have a very, very high amount of goodwill in the relational account, that's kind of fantasy level high, right? Is when our kid will go out of his or her way to be helpful and to make our life joyous. This is the breakfast in bed scenario, coming back to a clean home with everything scrubbed kind of a situation. Moderate high is when our child essentially cooperates, quite cheerful. with any reasonable request and maybe some unreasonable requests. Can you go do this? Sure. Would you mind? Blah, blah, blah. Of course, no problem. Relational account is probably low on goodwill when you make requests, including reasonable and minimal requests, and your child is sometimes cooperating, sometimes not, maybe kind of a 50-50, maybe kind of a 70 no, 30 yes kind of a situation. That means that the relational account is not very high. And then, of course, if we continue withdrawing more than we put into the account, and this is easy to do by forcing kids to do things that they really don't want to do, then we hit overdraft, essentially. And that looks like the opposite of high account balance. This is when your kid will spontaneously go out of his or her way to make your life difficult and to annoy you. Essentially, is a way to assert power, right? To assert some power in their own lives. To say, I can do things to you like you do things to me. Okay. So having a high relational account balance, having a lot of goodwill in the relationship is helpful in terms of just from the get-go, having it be more likely that our kid will consider goals that we set out and maybe be willing to try them. It looks like, so a high relational account balance, again, looks like something like if your kid says, oh, my dad or my mom understands me, my mom cares about me, my mom respects me, my mom wants to help me achieve my goals, right? All of these things help your kid feel that you're a team and are all part of that same idea of building alignment. So this sets up the groundwork essentially for a conversation about the goals. So let's say that you want your child to start doing his own laundry. Let's say this is a 14-year-old, and you're like, it's time. Like you'll do laundry, maybe for everybody, actually. This may be a tough lift, right? If you just come out of nowhere and say you're going to start doing laundry right now for everybody, your kid may say yes or your kid may say no, but it's likely you're going to have to use some force. You're going to end up hurting the relationship a little bit in doing this. And so the question is, what's a nicer way, a gentler way to come at it? So you might start by sharing an observation. Really, it starts by you asking yourself, would my child want to do this? Does my child see any value in this? And it's a good conversation to have with yourself in advance of this conversation that you're going to have with your kid. And once you have it in your head, more or less clearly, then you can start with your kid, approaching your kid and sharing an observation, saying, hey, Danny, I noticed you basically never do the laundry, and you've been talking more and more about how much fun it'll be to live on your own, right, when you're bigger. And living on your own means you need to learn how to do laundry. Is that something that you think about ever? Like, are you preparing for this, what it's going to be like to live on your own? And so you have this conversation and you check, like, do you have any interest in doing laundry? Do you care about this at all? And you can come at it from different directions, right? Of course, you might say, oh, it's about you living alone, but it could be about, I'm very busy here and I'm doing everything for everyone. And I know that you need more help with this or with that. And in order for me to do this, I need some help on the other side, right? Does it make sense? Do you see this? Does it make sense to you too? That I'm asking for you to pitch in on this side because you're bigger and you understand how to do these things. And I think you could learn. I think it'd be pretty easy for you. And then I can be more available to do whatever it is. Or it might not be this transactional, right? You might just say, look, I'm carrying a lot here and I think you're a lot bigger now. And I think you're able to pitch in effectively and start helping around the house. What do you think? Do you want to help more around the house? Some kids might say yes, some kids might say no, right? But a lot of the pregame is you having this conversation in your head and trying to have a sense of what your kid cares about and what goal of your child can you connect to, them wanting to be independent, them wanting to be helpful, them wanting to free up your time so they can get more of your time from another direction. But whatever it is, starting to align on goals together. So the question is, at some point, you're going to say, so does it make sense to you to start getting more involved in doing laundry? Maybe it's just folding laundry. Maybe it's just putting it in and I'll fold it. Maybe you share it between the siblings, right? But you agree on a goal. Does it make sense to you to be the person stuffing the stuff in the machine and turning all the various knobs that have taken me personally many years to learn how to operate, were very intimidating for me as a child, but that's an aside. So if you don't agree on the goal, that requires discussion. Your alternative to discussing the goal more, you have two alternatives. You can force your child to do it, and you probably can to a point, but it's going to hurt the relationship. It's going to make subsequent conversations about subsequent cooperations harder. But you could force your child. That's one option. And another option is essentially to request your child to do this on the strength of your relationship alone. This is really important to me. Are you willing to do this? And again, depending on the strength of your relationship, your child may say yes, or your child may say no. But doing this also will pull a lot of goodwill points out of your account, right? Less than forcing your child, but will still pull. These are all valid alternatives, right? But the ideal way to do it, I think, although the slowest, is to reach alignment on the goal. So if you don't have alignment on the goal, if you say, so what do you think? Do you want to try learning how to stuff the clothes in the machine and turn the knobs and press the buttons? And your kid says no, then you have to continue having the conversation about this. Oh my goodness, Deborah. Hello, nice glasses. So continuing to have the conversation about the goal, understanding the why and the why not of your kid. Those of you that want to go like really in depth into this is essentially motivational interviewing that you're doing with your kid. If you want to look up literature or the Wikipedia entry, which turns you into an instant expert, look up motivational interviewing. At some point, ideally, you agree on the goal, and then it's about agreeing on the path to achieving that goal, right? So if the goal is doing laundry, then, is it once a week? Is it once a month? Is it, collecting all the laundry from the different rooms? Does it include folding or not? If the goal is to keep the room clean, and you somehow miraculously got to a point where your child agrees that it's a good idea to keep the room clean and tidy, then how do we do it? Do we clean every day? Do we clean once a week? What does clean mean? Do we pick stuff up and put it, like, do we push everything to one corner? Does that make sense? Do we pick up two things every day, right? And kind of start small and make it successful. But agreeing together on what the solution, what the path looks like is just as important as agreeing on the goal. If you're able to agree on a solution, let's start, I guess, with the no. If you're not able to agree on it, it's kind of the same as when you don't have agreement on the, you have to either reach alignment or force your child or beg your child, right? I think alignment is ideal. And the others are viable options if you don't have the time to reach alignment. And you can experiment a lot with what the solution looks like, right? You might say, let's go to the room cleaning example. You might say, I want you to pick up everything off the floor every day before dinner. And your kid might say, that's nice, but no, it's just too much. It's not going to happen. And you might say, okay, well, what do you suggest? And your kid might say, I'll clean once a week, but I'll clean perfectly once a week. And in your mind, you might be thinking, it's not going to be anywhere near perfect, and it may not be once a week, but maybe it's a good enough start, right? Or you might be thinking, that sounds good. Or your kid might suggest, I can pick up one thing every day before dinner. And you're like, how about three things, right? And you arrive at a point where it's starting to sound like a reasonable solution to everybody. And if you do agree on a solution, wonderful, then you can go. I really encourage you, and I'll say this a couple more times probably as I talk about, I really encourage you to suggest experiments, right? So let's do this for a week and see what it looks like. Let's do this for a day and see what it feels like. But if you're suggesting experiments, it also means being open to your kids' experiments, right? Your kid might say, oh, you want me to do homework? You want homework to always be ready for school. I also think it's important, but I have other very important things I need to do when I get back home. So I propose that I be super focused from 5:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. and I'll do all my homework then. And you might say, that doesn't sound like enough time. And your kid will say, oh, no. If I'm super focused, it's enough time. And then you might say, okay, how about we try this for the coming week, right? And let's just see what happens. And we'll reconvene and debrief and see how it worked. And doing this is fantastic modeling for your child too. And a good start for reciprocation, because when that inevitably fails, you might say, how about we experiment with something different, right? Instead of 5:30 to 6, how about we do it right after dinner for an hour or something like that, right? And your kid might say, that sounds like a lot. You might say, can we try for a week like we tried your thing, right? Then it becomes pretty reasonable to make that suggestion and that request. But experimentation is key. So in summary, aligning on the goal, super important. If you're not aligning, if your donkey does not want to go there, all right, the whole thing is just this very long drag fest. And if your donkey does want to go there, then it's important that you both agree on what the path is to going there and which obstacles you're going around and in what direction and how fast and all of these things, right? So alignment, as much as you can, involve your child, talk with your child, think in advance, what is my child's goal? How can I link this with my child's goals? I'll tell you a quick story. Excuse me. So my son is 5 1/4, he insists. He's right, but so he's 5 1/4, and kind of starting with reading and writing. I don't think I read until I was 7, but apparently times are changing. So he's just starting with that, and he actually recognized a lot of letters like a year ago, and then we kind of dropped it, and he stopped, and he doesn't recognize them anymore. Writing, he has zero interest in. He just does not want to do it, and I don't want to push him too much because I don't want to create antagonism in him toward writing, right? So I want to be gentle with that. I want to be careful. But I was thinking about, how do I get him to read more, to start reading a little more seriously, and to start writing. I was ambitious in my mind. This was a week ago. And then I started formulating a plan for this. And then I remembered that I have like an actual session that I do on this. And I went and looked at the slides. And I thought, why would he care about reading? Like, what possible benefit is there for him in reading? He doesn't need to read anything. And I tried having the conversation in my mind. I was like, oh, this way you could read instructions for how to put together toys. He's like, I'm putting together my toys just fine. The Legos don't have words. It's fine. I don't need to. I'm like, oh, you could read a menu. I don't order anything in restaurants. We bring pasta from home. It's like I'm having this conversation in my mind with myself, but trying to understand, why would it be important for him to read? Why would he care? I can force him to do these exercises, but I don't want to. Right? So how do I motivate him to do it? How do I show him that it's helpful or beneficial to him? I can tell you more about how that's going, but that's unfolding in real time. But I'm spending like a week on aligning on the goals. First in my mind, understanding how to align, and then starting to have short conversations with him about this. Excuse me. So the conversations are not in and of themselves annoying for him, right? I'm just kind of touching and seeing if I can find a place where he goes like, oh yeah, that would be interesting. And then I can go, oh, to do this, it would be good to learn how to read. And then we can start talking about, well, how do we learn? How much time do we spend on this? What's tolerable? What sounds like fun versus annoying, and so on, right? But I just want to give you a concrete example. Like, I spend a lot of time thinking about how to align on the goals, because once that's done, everything is easy, right? Then I have my donkey wearing ice skates on a frozen river. Like, then it's easy. Right? I don't want to be dragging him through the mud. A lot of time on alignment, a lot of time on agreement. Okay. A couple of tips, kind of separate from what I've talked about so far. Mostly, one is the more explicit you can be about your goodwill toward your child, the better. Say it. Say it very clearly. Say it. I'm proposing this because I think it'll make your life better in these ways. Right? And these should be ways that they care about, things that they care about. I'm doing this because I love you. I'm doing this, I'm suggesting this because I think it'll help you get this thing that you really want. And conversely, if you're not doing it for them, if you're doing it for you, because it'll make your life better, just say it. Just be honest about it. right? Don't kind of try to snow them over and pretend that it's for them. Just say like, it would be a huge help for me. I would really appreciate it if you could do it. So that's one. Two, check and check and check repeatedly that you understand the goal that you're talking about and that you're staying in alignment as the process continues. I said this before, and I think this is the last time I'll say it today, but experimentation is enormous, right? You can run very quick experiments. And if everybody knows that it's okay for an experiment to end with, well, that didn't work, then everybody will be willing to experiment a lot, right? Young kids will taste foods if it's okay for them to not like them, right? If they know that when they say no, you're like, great, thank you for trying. Grown-up kids will try different methods for achieving a goal if it's okay for them to say that didn't work, but agree in advance. Especially if you agree to do their experiments, or if you agree for them to do their experiments and have that as part of the deal, that they then agree with your experiments and just see how it goes. But be empirical, experiment, see what works. The debrief after experiments is important. Just be careful not to come down too high-handed, right? When they do their week of doing homework or their 2 days of doing homework for 30 minutes a day, and then they fall behind, right? Try to debrief about it again, like you would as a I don't know who would do it, like you would do it. Try to say something like, well, how do you feel 30 minutes went? Do you feel like you were able to do everything? How come? Why not? What are other things that okay, my sense is maybe this wasn't enough time. Would you be open to doing more, right? But not be like, well, I told you in advance that's not going to be enough. That just hurts the relationship, right? It makes them defensive, not more open to running your experiments. Just be careful of the I told you so. So if you want, I'll put the link in the chat, but if you go to parentingforhumans.com/join, you can join the newsletter. The newsletter will send you, more thoughts and stories, and then future opportunities to do these kinds of sessions. The URL for the slides is down there.